A few days ago, I watched a creator named Tony Stadavici discuss the live-action show of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Some people are just effortlessly hilarious, and he is no exception. What's entertaining about this is that it's pure glee watching him slowly work out that since the live-action adaptation is adjusting certain parts away from the animated adaptation, it means drastic changes later on down the line.
Your people over there, they can't understand me, but you can. So, where's the library? So you know what that means, right? We're not getting Appa's lost days. We're not getting that. Like, Appa going missing, how is that going to happen? The only reason that happened is because the sand benders took him. The only reason they were in the sand was to go to I just realized. How are they going to figure out the information for the Day of the Black Sun?
I think it's the mark of a phenomenal masterpiece if you adjust one thing that might seem small, and it will have drastic consequences later on. It's more evidence for why this show shouldn't have been made. But it did remind me of someone that I knew a long time ago. Have you ever had a friend who was cool when you first met them, but then the more you got to know them, the less you wanted to hang out? There was a girl I knew back in grade school, who we'll call Sarah since that's the most generic female name I can think of right now. This was right around the time that the live-action movie adaptation of Avatar: Last Airbender movie came out, and I remember her mentioning to my cousin, "Oh my gosh, yeah, I love that movie." And when I asked what movie they were talking about and she told me, I just stared at her like, I was a dumbass kid, so I probably phrased what I said next way more rudely than I meant to, but I basically responded with, "You know that's ranked as one of the worst movies of the decade, right?" She looked surprised, and then I asked, "Did you even watch the original show?" And then she replied, "No." Many years later, I reflect on that moment as a reminder that, no matter how bad life gets, at least I'm not cursed with those opinions. But I do want to explore that feeling, because a question has been floating around in my head for some time now. Why did it bother me so much that someone liked something that I thought was obviously terrible? Or, to shorten that question, why do I care? Is it my job to shit on people's opinions for liking things? No. I'm not getting paid for this, but that doesn't change the feeling itself. I'm still annoyed when people celebrate something that I find creatively insulting. And I think that there's a reason for that. If you avoid the internet, first off, congratulations. That's genuinely impressive. But if you spent any amount of time online, you've probably noticed that people love taking ideas to extremes. One mindset I've seen become more and more common lately is, well, just live and let live, man. And on the surface, yeah, that sounds peaceful, reasonable even. But when you take that mentality to its extreme, it becomes frustrating because it implies I'm supposed to lower my standards for something I have genuine admiration for just to make room for an opinion that makes no sense. I don't want to come across like someone permanently cynical or someone who only enjoys tearing movies apart. That mindset is exhausting, and constant negativity is just not healthy. But there is another argument I keep hearing that has become just as annoying. Well, humor is subjective. Originally, people used that phrase to politely disagree with someone saying, well, that's not funny. And in some situations, that is fair. I think it's most applicable to something like modern Marvel writing, where every line has to be a quip, and not in a fun Spider-Man kind of way.
Glib does not equate with clever, Spider-Man!
Yeah, well, the ratio of arms to sanity hasn't exactly been established either.
Do you ever shut up?
More like the writers are terrified of letting a serious moment breathe for more than 5 seconds before someone says something stupid for a cheap laugh. Because God forbid a scene has sincerity.
The Guardians was involved in a head-on collision with another spacecraft. There were no survivors.
Oh no.
Well, I hope they had insurance. Bro, why the fuck would he say that?
Everything has to follow the same money-printing formula that Disney got addicted to. Nowadays, though, humor is subjective has basically become a force field against criticism. A shield people hide behind to excuse weak writing, bad storytelling, or lazy creative decisions. And I think that mentality kills potential. Because instead of asking how could this be better, people respond with, well, why do you care so much? And that drives me insane. Why? Because I think it could have been amazing. As Robert Robertson III said in Dispatch, there's nothing that goes more wasted than potential, and that line really sticks with me. Because when you know the original source material, you understand how incredible an adaptation could be. And make no mistake, I'm not gonna stand on a soapbox pretending I could personally do better. Shit, maybe I'd try and I'd accidentally create the next Spider-Man Lotus. But the attitude of, well, it's just fun, why do you care? It feels soft. It comes across as a little disingenuous, and honestly, it comes across as kind of insulting. Because the people consuming the original media know how incredible the story is supposed to be. They know what it's capable of. So when a beloved story gets handed to people who deliver a watered-down version of the characters, themes, and writings, and then any criticism gets brushed aside by people who barely understand what's being adapted in the first place, suddenly, it becomes a lot clearer why Sarah saying Avatar: The Last Airbender movie was good annoyed me so much. The movie itself was basically a spit in the face of everyone who had admiration for the show, and that's the frustrating part. Nobody gets this passionate about something they expect nothing from. People get angry when they see wasted potential. Take something like Marvel's Spider-Man 2. When that game was first released, people praised it non-stop. The hype train was crazy. And then it lost every category at the Game Awards, and suddenly people started reflecting on it more honestly and realizing, wait, this is actually worse than the first game. Oh my god, why would you double down on the worst part of the first game? Nobody enjoyed the Mary Jane missions.
Let's talk about the MJ missions a little bit.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Because you made her like the most OP character in the game. Let's just get it out there.
She's OP.
One shot everybody.
She's OP. I knew that those missions weren't the fan favorites coming out of Spider-Man 1. We knew we had to make her more of a proactive, capable person. And if she's a little OP, I don't give a shit. It's important to have her be a capable hero. You know, this might sound cliche or whatever, cheesy, but like you don't need to have powers to be a hero. In the original plan, she wasn't a playable character in the last mission, but we thought, hey, can we get all three of them working as a team in that final mission? So at the very end, she's there. But yeah, she's OP. She's probably OP. I don't care.
That's a thought. A lot of writers, and honestly a lot of the people aggressively defending these products, seem more focused on delivering a message or performing activism than telling a genuinely compelling story. During production, there were already reports coming out that made people nervous. One of the biggest eyebrow-raising decisions was the removal of Sokka's sexism early in the story. Why? Well, now there's no lesson for him to learn, and by removing Sokka's sexism in the name of feminism, they accidentally removed the entire point of his character arc. and somehow they turned Suki, one of the coolest women in the original series, into more of a shallow love interest in the process. I genuinely don't know how nobody in the writer's room realized how ass backwards that was. This kind of loops back to my original point. When you try to fix a story that already worked, you often end up creating something worse because the writers wanted to make a point that didn't need to be made in the first place. It's frustrating, it's disappointing, and it's really, really sad. What's even worse is the response people give whenever you criticize it. Because now criticism itself gets treated like some moral failure. If you care too much, you're toxic. If your standards are too high, you're a sexist nerd who hates women. And if you point out bad writing, suddenly storytelling is subjective. So apparently standards just don't matter anymore. People were relieved when the series came out because it was better than the original movie adaptation. But as Drew Gooden once pointed out, beating the bare minimum is not an accomplishment. Congratulations, you made something less terrible than the worst version imaginable. Why would I clap for that? Standards are the reason masterpieces exist in the first place. The original show worked because the people behind it actually had standards. They weren't asking audiences to lower the bar for them. They had a story to tell. They knew they could do better. And most importantly, they cared. I think another aspect of this problem is that there is a level of corporate delusion people don't ever talk about anymore because it's become so normal.
And the corporations sit there in their corporation buildings and see that they're all corporation-y and they make money.
At the root of every major decision these companies make is money, and when something becomes wildly successful, you're guaranteed to get soulless copycats trying to squeeze profit out of the original idea. But I don't think it's only corporations. because the quote-unquote suits making these decisions are still people. And people will do incredibly stupid things for money if you offer them enough incentive. One of the most common examples of this is LARPing. And by LARPing, I mean pretending to be part of a culture or community you don't actually care about just to gain an audience from it. I think the best example I can think of is the Anime Men. If you don't know who they are, honestly, good for you. Their content mostly revolves around formulaic anime jokes, stereotypical humor, and surface-level references designed to appeal to anime fans. And on the surface, sure, it's harmless. But then they released a video ranking the first episodes of popular anime from that year, and it accidentally exposed the entire act. They were asking questions nobody who actually watches the shows would ask. Stuff like, why does Goku have a tail? Then there was literal footage of them either watching the episodes at 2x speed or outright admitting that they weren't going to finish the episode. If this was something like Fate Zero, where the first episode is slow moving, I could at least understand the criticism, but that wasn't the issue. The issue was that they clearly didn't care about the material whatsoever. They just wanted the audience attached to it. At first, I remember thinking when this came out, who gives a shit, but then I stopped myself. Because what they were really doing was pretending to love something in order to profit from the people who actually did. And suddenly, it became way more insulting than just playing pretend, because this is exactly what corporations do. Again, I'm not gonna say that these guys are evil masterminds or comparable to some massive corporation destroying an IP, and honestly, I can't even deny they made a genuinely great music video about one of my favorite anime. But I do think they accidentally revealed something true. Anyone is capable of selling out. Some people just have a cheaper price tag than others. I think the point I'm trying to make is pretty simple. I care because bad adaptations, sequels, and creatively bankrupt writing are frustrating, specifically because they didn't have to be bad. I said this before, nobody gets this passionate over something they expected nothing from. People get angry when they see wasted potential, or when they see a story that they love handed to people who either didn't understand it, didn't respect it, or were more interested in chasing trends than telling a good story. Yeah, sometimes people act like criticism itself is toxic now. Like, if you care too much, or if your standards are too high, you're just some bitter nerd living in the past. But standards are what make masterpieces possible in the first place. The original Avatar worked because the people behind it cared about the world, the characters, themes, and the writing. They weren't trying to hit a quota. They weren't trying to farm applause from people who would forget that the show existed a week later. They were trying to make something good. That's the difference. And honestly, you can tell when someone actually loves what they're making. You can also tell when someone walked into a writer's room like a tourist at a convention, skimmed the Wikipedia summary, added a few trendy buzzwords, and expected applause for reimagining something they barely understood. Those people always want credit for being bold and creative, but somehow the final product always feels like it was assembled by a marketing department wearing human skin. The irony is that people who chase money and validation above everything else usually end up making the most forgettable slop imaginable, because audiences can feel authenticity. And no matter how many interviews, marketing campaigns, or Twitter essays try to convince people otherwise, passion is obvious. And so is soullessness.